The pantry door was left slightly ajar, just enough for a cold, stark line of white light to spill in from the hallway. Inside, it smelled of dried spices, freshly ground coffee, and that deep silence found in overly large houses when everyone is asleep. There, sitting on the floor, her back pressed against the cabinetry as if she wished to disappear into the wood, was Chloe Davis, the housekeeper. She wore her sensible burgundy uniform with a white apron, her hair neatly tied back under a simple hairnet, and her eyes were downcast, sunken in a sadness that needed no words. In her trembling hands, she held a plate with rice and beans, leftovers someone had left on a silver tray hours earlier. With a fork, she separated the grains as if counting coins. She ate slowly, not out of delicacy, but out of fear. Fear that the sound would give her away. Fear that this small relief would end too soon. At the far end of the hallway, several steps away, Marcus Sterling, a millionaire in a dark suit, had stopped as if the marble floor of his own home had struck him in the back of the neck. Marcus was not a man accustomed to standing still. In Sydney, his surname, Sterling, commanded respect and caution. Owner of enterprises, an astute investor, a frequent guest at events where flashes blind you and smiles mean nothing. But at that moment, with his hands clasped in front of him and his jaw tight, Marcus seemed a stranger in his own mansion. He had come down to the staff quarters, searching for a glass of water, brought low by insomnia, and what he found was this impossible scene, a woman hiding, eating what wasn't meant for her, with the gesture of someone apologizing for existing. Chloe felt his presence before she saw him. Some gazes carry weight. She raised her head barely a couple of centimeters, just enough for the moist glimmer in her eyes to meet the man's shadow. She froze, the fork suspended in the air, her throat closed. "Mr. Sterling," she whispered, and in that word, all the dignity she still tried to maintain seemed to drain away. Marcus did not respond immediately. The silence stretched like a taut rope, and the only sound was the emotionless hum of the refrigerator in the background. "What are you doing here?" he finally asked, his voice lower than he would have permitted himself in a board meeting. Chloe swallowed, looked at the plate as if the food could explain what she dared not say. Then she clutched the edge of the porcelain with her fingers, as if it were a lifeline. "Sorry, I didn't mean to bother. Her lips trembled. "I was just hungry." The word hungry hung in the air, ugly, uncomfortable, like a stain on an expensive carpet. Marcus heard it as if it were an accusation, not against him, at least not out loud, but his house, his system, his perfect order. Everything suddenly sounded like a lie. Chloe lowered her gaze, expecting the usual blow, a reprimand, a threat, a look of contempt. "Gather your things and leave." She had lived it before in other wealthy homes, in other cities. She had worked in Adelaide, in Perth, in Brisbane, always the same. Enormous doors, invisible rules, and people who never looked you in the eye. Instinctively, she gripped the fork tightly, as if it could be snatched away from her. Marcus took a step, then another. The hallway light silhouetted him against the shelves full of spice jars and bottles aligned by size. When he was closer, he could see that Chloe was not eating with desperation, but with care, like someone trying to make a sliver of peace last. He could also see the dark circles under her eyes, the dry skin on her knuckles, the frayed edge of her uniform sleeve, details never seen when one lives upstairs, where problems are just numbers on screens. "Chloe," he said, and pronouncing her name sounded strange, as if he had never said it aloud before. "How long have you been doing this?" She swallowed again. Shame crept up her neck like a fever. "Not always, Mr. Sterling. Only these past few days," she confessed. "Sometimes, it's just not enough." Marcus frowned, not because he disbelieved her, but because his brain, trained to close deals and foresee risks, didn't know where to file this reality. "Not enough?" he repeated, as if it were a phrase in a foreign language. "With what we pay you?" Chloe let out a tiny, joyless laugh. It wasn't mockery, it was weariness. "With what I'm paid here, I pay for my small flat, the bus fare, my mum's medicine, and what I can, I send for my kids." Her eyes welled up. "And by the time the weekend comes, there's nothing left." Marcus felt a sharp pain in his chest. Her kids, he knew nothing about that. He knew Chloe was punctual, quiet, efficient. He knew no one complained about her. He knew the house sparkled, but he didn't know there was a life behind the uniform. Chloe's hand trembled, and the fork gently clinked against the plate, making a sound too loud for her liking. That sound seemed to snap the millionaire out of his paralysis. "I'm not going to fire you for this," Marcus said, almost defensively, as if anticipating the fear on her face. No one should have to hide to eat. Chloe looked up quickly, incredulous. Her eyes searched for a trap. The wealthy, in her experience, never gave anything without exacting a price. Marcus leaned forward slightly, without fully bending, as if the distance between them was an abyss he didn't know how to cross. "Why didn't you say anything?" he asked. Chloe pressed her lips together. "Because, who do you tell?" she replied with raw honesty. "One is invisible here, and when one speaks, one is just a nuisance." That sentence struck Marcus more forcefully than any newspaper headline. Invisible. The entire house was full of people he didn't see, people who made his life function, people who were hungry. Marcus straightened up, looked around perfect shelves, wicker baskets, labeled jars, a pantry that looked like a catalog, and yet, a woman sitting on the floor eating leftovers as if committing a crime. Somewhere down the hallway, a clock chimed the hour with a subtle tick. Marcus felt for the first time in years that time did not belong to him. "Come," he said suddenly, and his tone was neither an order nor a reprimand, but something clumsier, an urgency. Chloe tensed. "Mr. Sterling, I'll finish up and—" "No, please, come," Marcus insisted, and that word, please, sounded odd and heavy coming from him. She hesitated. Then, carefully, she put the plate aside, wiped her lips with the back of her hand, and stood up. Her knees creaked slightly. Marcus noticed that detail too. Accumulated physical exhaustion. They walked down the hallway in silence. The millionaire walked ahead, but not with his usual arrogant confidence. He walked like someone entering a dark room searching for something long lost. They reached the main kitchen, enormous, modern, with gleaming surfaces that reflected the light. Marcus opened the refrigerator as if it were a confession, took out a container of food, bread, fruit. Then he looked at Chloe. "If you're going to eat, you'll eat here," he said, sitting in a chair with a glass of water, not hiding. Chloe blinked, swallowing a lump in her throat. She didn't know whether to thank him or cry. The kitchen, to her, was foreign territory. Even though she worked in it, it was the heart of the house, but never the heart of her life. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," she whispered. Marcus stared at his hands as if he suddenly didn't know what to do with them. "My name is Marcus," he corrected, without harshness. "When others aren't around, you can call me Marcus." Chloe opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She nodded. She sat down slowly, as if the chair were fragile, or as if she didn't deserve to occupy it. Marcus poured her water. He watched Chloe drink carefully, and the simple act of drinking in someone's sight, without fear, seemed to cost her more than cleaning the entire house. And right there, in that second where the kitchen became a stage of truth, Marcus felt something break inside him. It wasn't a great blow. It was a silent crack. The same kind of crack that begins on a perfect wall and eventually reveals what lies beneath. Because Marcus didn't just see the housekeeper eating leftovers. He saw a woman carrying a world. He saw a system of which he was owner and accomplice, and without yet understanding how, he knew that image would never let him sleep again. And before I continue, let me tell you something. If this scene squeezed your chest, if you felt the injustice and also that hope that something will change, then this story is for you. Subscribe to the channel right now because twists are coming that will leave you speechless. And here, we tell stories that not only entertain, but also awaken the heart. And I ask you a question. From what city are you listening to this story? Leave it in the comments. I want to read you because perhaps somewhere someone feels just as invisible as Chloe felt that night. Marcus leaned against the countertop, watching Chloe eat again, no longer hidden, but still with her shoulders hunched. She brought a mouthful to her lips, and her eyes moistened. She didn't cry, she resisted. People like Chloe learn to swallow tears as they learn to wash dishes quickly, without making a sound. "What are your children's names?" Marcus asked, trying to sound casual, though his voice had a new tension. Chloe chewed slowly before replying. "Sophie and Matt," she said. "Sophie is 8, Matt is 5. Marcus repeated the names internally as if they were a password. "Do they live with you here in Sydney?" She shook her head. "No. They're with my mum in Alice Springs. I send what I can, and when I save enough, I go to see them." But she bit her lip. "It's been 3 months since I hugged them." Marcus felt that sentence like a blunt blow. He thought of his own children upstairs, asleep in enormous rooms, with toys they didn't touch, with nannies who cared for them. He thought of how sometimes he gave them a distracted kiss before heading to a meeting. He thought of how easy it was for him to say, "tomorrow," and make it happen. For Chloe, tomorrow was an expensive promise. "And your mum?" he asked almost unconsciously. "She has lung disease," Chloe replied. "She needs inhalers, and sometimes the doctor. I do what I can." Marcus lowered his gaze. "I do what I can." He said that too, but in his world, it meant choosing between two investments. In Chloe's world, it meant choosing between eating or buying medicine. A strange silence fell, not uncomfortable, but heavy, as if the entire house were listening. Marcus walked to the kitchen window, looked at the perfect garden illuminated by soft lights, and felt ashamed. Not the superficial shame of "what will people say," but a more dangerous shame, one that forces you to see your entire life and ask yourself when you became so insensitive. "Mr. Sterling," Chloe began, but couldn't find the end of the sentence. She looked at him, alert, accustomed to any kind gesture coming with a condition. Marcus took a deep breath. "Tomorrow, I want you to come with me to the administration office," he said. "We're going to review your salary and your hours and whatever else you need, so you don't have to go through this again." Chloe remained motionless. Fear rushed back, but mixed with something that burned in her eyes. "Hope, Mr. Sterling, I don't want any trouble," she said quickly. "If I did something wrong, tell me, and I'll—" "You didn't do anything wrong," Marcus interrupted firmly. "I was the one doing something wrong, without even knowing it." Those simple words made Chloe gasp as if she'd been underwater. Marcus forced himself to look at her directly. "I thought that just paying you was enough," he continued. "I thought my responsibility ended with the check, but you—" He gestured towards the hallway from which they had come. "You were eating hidden in my house, in a house where there's plenty of food. That doesn't make sense." Chloe lowered her gaze again, because when someone powerful admits guilt, people like her don't know how to stand without trembling. "Sometimes you get used to it," Chloe murmured. "To the shame, I mean." Marcus closed his eyes for a second. The word "accustomed" sent shivers down his spine, because he too had become accustomed to not seeing. At that instant, from upstairs came a soft sound, like a small whimper, a child. Marcus opened his eyes abruptly. "Did you hear that?" he asked. Chloe nodded. "It must be little Mia," she said, and her voice changed tone naturally, soft, maternal. "Sometimes she wakes up from nightmares." Marcus tensed. Mia was his youngest daughter, 6 years old. Since his wife's death a year ago, Mia had bad nights, and Marcus had sought refuge in work, in figures, in the idea that pain could be fixed with control. But pain doesn't understand control. "The nanny is with her," Marcus said as if trying to convince himself. Chloe hesitated. "Today, the nanny left early, because her son was unwell. I stayed on guard in case anything happened." Marcus felt another pang. Chloe, hungry, exhausted, with her whole world on her shoulders, and still looking after his daughter. "Why?" he asked. And it wasn't a question from a boss. It was a question from a broken man. "Why did you stay?" Chloe looked at the almost empty plate. "Because children aren't to blame for anything," she replied. "And because since your wife isn't here anymore, it's clear the little girl needs a hug." Marcus gripped the countertop. The truth pierced him like a knife. His daughter needed a hug, and he wasn't there. Marcus walked towards the stairs, but before ascending, he turned. "When you're finished, come up," he told Chloe. "I want you to show me Mia's room and how you calm her down when she wakes up." Chloe's eyes widened in surprise. It wasn't common for the millionaire to ask to learn something that wasn't his concern. "All right," she whispered. Marcus went upstairs slowly, each step sounding like a judgment. Upon reaching the bedroom hallway, he heard Mia's voice, broken, calling him, "Dad." The voice was small, fragile. "Dad, are you there?" Marcus stopped in front of the door. For a second, he was afraid to enter. Afraid of not knowing what to say, afraid of discovering that love could also be lost through absence. He entered. Mia was sitting on the bed, hugging a teddy bear. Her eyes were red. Seeing him, she extended a trembling hand. "I dreamt Mummy left again," she said. Marcus swallowed, approached, sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time in weeks, hugged his daughter with intention, not in haste. "I'm not leaving," he promised her, though he didn't know if he could keep it. Mia clung to his neck. "I heard you downstairs," she murmured. "Who were you talking to?" Marcus felt his heart clench. "To Chloe," he replied. "She works here, and she helped me understand something important." Mia pulled back slightly and looked at him. "Chloe is kind," the girl said with absolute certainty. "When I cry, she sings to me softly." Marcus closed his eyes for an instant. How was it possible that his daughter knew Chloe's kindness more than he did? About half an hour later, Chloe went upstairs with timid steps. She stood at the door as if the bedroom hallway wasn't her territory. Marcus saw her from Mia's room. "Come in," he told her. Chloe entered slowly. Mia looked at her, and her face lit up. "Chloe," she whispered, and extended her arms. Chloe hesitated, looking at Marcus, waiting for permission. Marcus nodded. Then Chloe approached and hugged the girl with a tenderness that filled the air. Mia rested her head on her shoulder, and Chloe stroked her hair as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Do you want me to sing to you?" Chloe asked. Mia nodded. Chloe began to sing a soft lullaby in a low voice. Marcus watched from the corner, feeling something in his chest loosen, like a tie finally undone after years. When the girl calmed down, Marcus spoke in a low voice, so as not to break the moment. "Chloe," he said, "I didn't know any of this." She didn't stop stroking Mia's hair. "You've had a lot on your plate, Mr. Sterling," she replied, without accusation, only with truth. "The house gets used to functioning even when someone is missing, but children don't get used to it the same way." Marcus felt the lesson like a wave. In his world, everything could be replaced. A manager, a supplier, a car, a plan, but a mother's hug could not. When Mia fell asleep, Chloe carefully got up, as if sleep were a fragile thing. Marcus accompanied her to the hallway. "Thank you," he said, and for the first time, that word sounded as it should, like a debt. Chloe lowered her gaze. "I'm just doing my job." Marcus shook his head. "You do more than that. And his voice cracked slightly, "I've been living as if the people here were just part of the furniture." Chloe didn't respond, because sometimes when someone powerful begins to see, it's best to let silence finish the work. Marcus watched her walk away down the service hallway, and then, just as she was about to turn the corner, Marcus saw something he hadn't seen before. A thread bracelet on her worn wrist with two tiny initials, S and M, Sophie and Matt. Marcus stood still. That bracelet was a reminder of a life Chloe carried, even when cleaning other people's bathrooms. A reminder that she wasn't just the housekeeper. She was a mother. That night, Marcus didn't return to his bedroom. He stayed in the study, looking at documents that no longer meant anything. He opened his laptop, reviewed numbers, contracts, budgets, but the image of Chloe eating leftovers on the floor burned in his mind like a still photograph. However, what disturbed him most wasn't Chloe's hunger. It was his own blindness. It was the realization that he had built an empire, and yet had failed at the most basic thing, humanity. Near dawn, he heard soft footsteps in the hallway. It was Chloe, ready to start the day, as if nothing had happened, as if shame hadn't trembled in her throat hours earlier. Marcus stepped out and stopped her with a gesture. "Chloe," he said. She stood still. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling." Marcus took a deep breath. "Today, we're going to fix this," he said. "Not just your salary, not just the food, everything." Chloe frowned, confused. "Everything what?" Marcus looked around, at the house, the staff, the hallways that seemed like labyrinths. "My life," he replied with an honesty that startled even himself. "Because last night I realized I have everything, but I am empty, and you, with less than you deserve, can still care for my children better than I can." Chloe opened her mouth, but said nothing. Sometimes the truth leaves you speechless. Marcus took another step closer. "I want to help you bring your children to Sydney." He blurted it out, as if he'd lose his nerve if he didn't say it then. "I want you to have a decent place and never go hungry again." Chloe froze. Her eyes filled with fear and suspicion, because big promises often bring pain. "Why?" she asked in a whisper. "What do you want in return?" Marcus felt a punch in the stomach. That she would think that was logical. Life had taught her to distrust. "Nothing," he said, and his voice was firm. "I want nothing in return. I just want to do the right thing." Chloe clenched her jaw. "The right thing," she repeated, tasting the word. "The right thing almost never comes for people like me." Marcus looked at her with honest pain. "Then we're going to bring it," he replied. "Even if it's late." Chloe swallowed, and in her eyes appeared that dangerous mix of hope and terror, the hope that something would finally change, and the terror that it would be a lie. And so, in the hallway of a mansion in Sydney, with the morning beginning to illuminate the pantry jars, Marcus Sterling felt that destiny was collecting a debt he didn't know he had. Because what he saw that night, a woman hiding to eat leftovers, wasn't just a sad scene, it was a mirror, and the reflection couldn't be ignored. But Marcus still didn't know the worst, nor what that truth would awaken, because Chloe's story wasn't just about hunger. It was a buried secret, a secret that, when it came to light, would shake that house from its foundations and change the millionaire's life forever. The morning at the Sterling mansion dawned differently, although nothing seemed to have changed at first glance. The sun streamed through the wide windows of the main dining room, illuminating the long table of polished wood where each plate was placed with mathematical precision. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with that of toast and fresh orange juice. Everything seemed perfect as always. But inside Marcus Sterling, something no longer fit. He stood by the head of the table, his jacket still on despite the mild Sydney warmth. He hadn't slept for more than an hour. The image of Chloe, sitting on the pantry floor, eating leftovers as if it were a crime, replayed in his mind again and again. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the tremor in her hands, the fear in her voice as she said the word, hungry. From the kitchen, Chloe watched the dining room with learned routine. She served breakfast with precise, silent movements. No one would have imagined that hours earlier she had been hiding, praying not to be discovered. Her face was serene, but her eyes held a different depth, as if she too knew that something had shifted in the invisible balance of the house. Mia came down the stairs in her pink pajamas, her hair disheveled. "Morning, Dad," she said, her voice still sleepy. Marcus looked at her differently that morning, not like the businessman checking schedules, but like a father just beginning to realize what he had been missing. "Morning, Princess," he replied, and this time his smile was genuine. Mia looked around. "Chloe's awake already." Marcus noticed the naturalness with which his daughter pronounced that name. "It wasn't the housekeeper, it was Chloe." "Yes," he replied. "She's in the kitchen." Mia slid off her chair and ran towards the door. "Chloe." Chloe appeared with a cloth in her hand, surprised by the enthusiasm. "Good morning, my little one," she greeted sweetly. Mia hugged her without hesitation. That simple, spontaneous gesture squeezed Marcus's chest as if someone were showing him a scene he should have seen months ago. During breakfast, Marcus observed details that had previously gone unnoticed. He saw how Chloe discreetly made sure Mia ate well. He saw how she brought the glass closer before the child asked for it. He saw that silent connection built in spaces where pain needs comfort. When the children finished and went to the garden with their governess, Marcus asked Chloe to stay. She tensed slightly. "Yes, Mr. Sterling, I want you to tell me the whole truth," he said, gesturing to a chair opposite the table. Chloe hesitated, looked at the floor. Sitting there in front of the owner of the house was not customary. "You don't need to sit, Mr. Sterling," she tried to say. "Yes, you do," he replied with quiet firmness. "If we're going to talk, we'll do it face to face." Chloe obeyed cautiously. She sat on the edge of the chair as if ready to stand up at any moment. Marcus took a deep breath. "Last night you told me it wasn't enough," he began. "I want to know exactly how you're living." The question wasn't an accusation but an attempt at understanding. Still, Chloe felt the old fear creep down her back. "I earn what was agreed, Mr. Sterling. I don't complain," she said automatically. Marcus shook his head. "I don't want to hear the right answer. I want to hear the truth." That nuance changed something. Chloe raised her gaze. For the first time, she didn't see the boss, but a confused man. "I pay for a room in a Western Sydney suburb," she began slowly. "It's small, shared. Sometimes the water goes out, sometimes the power. I send money to my mum for medication. Sophie needs new school supplies. Matt." Her voice barely broke. "Matt wants to join a soccer class." Marcus listened without interrupting. "I thought I could save more," she continued. "But when prices go up, something is always missing. And when you send the little you have, you're left with even less here." "How much do you have left each month for yourself?" Marcus asked. Chloe hesitated, embarrassed. "Some weeks? Nothing." The silence that followed was heavier than any reproach. Marcus leaned on the table, feeling each word was an uncomfortable revelation. "How many times have you gone hungry here?" Chloe lowered her gaze. "Enough, so no one would notice." That phrase hit hard. Marcus felt a mix of anger and guilt. "Why didn't you talk to me?" She looked at him with brutal honesty. "Because people like you don't usually listen to that, and because when you need too much, you become a burden." Marcus clenched his fists. "That's going to change." Chloe frowned. "Mr. Sterling, with respect, I've heard that before." Marcus looked at her intently. "I've also heard many promises in my life, but this isn't a promise. It's a decision." He stood up and walked to the window. He looked at the impeccable garden, the precisely trimmed hedges, everything under control, except the essential. "Today, we're going to adjust your salary," he continued. "But not just that. I want to review the conditions for all staff. No one here should have to hide to eat." Chloe felt a lump in her throat. "That could cause problems, Mr. Sterling." "For whom?" he asked. She hesitated. "For you, for the company, for your image." Marcus let out a brief, bitter laugh. "My image isn't worth more than the dignity of those who work with me." That sentence hung between them. But what Marcus still didn't know was that the story wasn't limited to Chloe's poverty. There was something deeper, something that explained her tired eyes, her way of hugging Mia with such intensity. "What else aren't you telling me?" he asked suddenly. Chloe felt her heart race. "Nothing." Marcus observed her carefully. "Last night you mentioned your mum is sick, but when you sang to Mia, it sounded like you were singing for someone else." Chloe closed her eyes for a second. "I sing the same for my children," she admitted. Marcus tilted his head. "Then tell me the complete truth." She took a deep breath. "My husband died 2 years ago," she finally said. "He was working in construction. He fell from scaffolding. There was no adequate compensation, no proper inquiry." Marcus felt a blunt blow to his chest. "Since then," she continued, "I am everything for my children." The kitchen fell silent. The distant sound from the garden seemed alien. "And that's why you came to Sydney?" he asked. Chloe nodded. "In Alice Springs, I couldn't find stable work. Here, at least, I have this. This a small word for such sacrifice." Marcus felt each layer of his comfortable life crumbling. The housekeeper he saw every day wasn't just a silent worker. She was a woman who had lost her husband, who was raising children from a distance, who sent every dollar as if it were gold. "You don't deserve to be hiding to eat," he said firmly. Chloe looked at him, but this time there was no distrust in her eyes. There was weariness and a timid hope. "Mr. Sterling," she whispered, "I don't want charity." "I'm not offering you charity," he replied. "I'm offering you justice." The word resonated in the air. At that instant, the front door burst open. The abrupt sound interrupted the moment. It was Lachlan, Marcus's brother and partner in several enterprises. He had a frown on his face and his phone in his hand. "Marcus, we need to talk," he said urgently. "Now." Lachlan stopped when he saw Chloe sitting at the table. "What's she doing here?" he asked, not disguising his annoyance. The atmosphere changed immediately. Chloe instinctively stood up. "Sorry, Mr. Lachlan," she murmured. Marcus felt a spark of anger. "She's here because I asked her to sit," he replied coldly. Lachlan raised an eyebrow. "Since when do you mix staff matters with family?" Marcus took a step forward. "Since I understood that staff aren't an inferior category, Lachlan." Lachlan looked at him with disbelief. "What's going on?" Marcus took a deep breath. "What's going on is that last night I discovered something that shouldn't be happening in my own house." Lachlan crossed his arms. "And that would be?" Marcus looked at Chloe, then at his brother. "That one of my employees was eating leftovers, hidden, because her salary wasn't enough." The silence was immediate. Lachlan let out a short laugh. "That's not your personal responsibility." Marcus looked at him sharply. "Of course, it is." Lachlan shook his head. "If you start getting emotionally involved with every employee, you'll lose control." Marcus felt the old business logic clash with the new crack that had opened inside him. "Perhaps control isn't the most important thing," he said with dangerous calm. Lachlan looked at him as if he didn't recognize the man in front of him. "Are you reacting to a sentimental scene?" Marcus took another step. "I'm not reacting. For the first time, I'm seeing reality." Lachlan was silent for a few seconds. "If you increase salaries without reviewing budgets, it will affect profitability." Marcus held his gaze. "Then, we'll review the budgets." Lachlan sighed. "You're getting involved in something unnecessary." Marcus shook his head. What was unnecessary was for her to go hungry here. Chloe remained still, feeling her life being discussed as if it were just another project. Marcus turned to her. "Chloe, you can excuse yourself for now." She nodded and left in silence, but with her heart pounding. When the door closed, Lachlan spoke in a low voice. "You can't let emotion guide your decisions, Marcus." Marcus looked at him with new clarity. "Perhaps that's why I've been empty for so long." Lachlan didn't reply. And while the brothers discussed numbers and principles, Chloe walked towards the staff quarters, her mind in a whirl. She didn't know if what had begun that morning would be her salvation, or the start of something that could break everything. Because sometimes, when someone powerful decides to change, not only is their life transformed, but resistances, secrets, and hidden interests are also awakened. And Chloe still didn't know that her husband's death hadn't been a simple accident, and that buried truth, for years, was about to come to light. And when it did, it wouldn't just change her destiny, it would change Marcus's forever. The rest of the day at the Sterling mansion was not normal. Nothing exploded, no one screamed. There were no dramatic scenes in front of the staff, but the air changed. It felt denser, like when a storm is brewing in Sydney, and the clouds haven't yet unleashed, but the sky is no longer the same. After the argument with Lachlan, Marcus locked himself in his study. He rarely did that. On the desk were contracts, folders with financial reports, growth charts, and quarterly projections. Everything that had defined his life for years, but now those sheets seemed like empty paper. He opened his laptop and began reviewing the payroll records for the domestic staff. Each name was a story he had never inquired about. Chloe Davis, Julia Peterson, Evan Miller seniority, hours, salaries, As he scrolled the cursor across the screen, he remembered Lachlan's words. If you start getting emotionally involved with every employee, you'll lose control. But what was control, really? A system that functioned without looking at the people who sustained it. Marcus closed his eyes for an instant and saw Chloe again on the floor, with the plate of rice and beans in her hand. No, that wasn't control. That was indifference. Meanwhile, in the staff quarters, Chloe sat on the edge of her narrow bed. The small space had a window that overlooked the back of the house. From there, she could see the high wall that separated the mansion from the rest of the world. A wall that had always seemed symbolic to her. She held her phone in her hands. She looked at the screen, not daring to call. Finally, she dialed her mother's number in Alice Springs. "Hello?" A tired voice answered on the other end. "Mom, it's me." "Chloe, darling, is everything all right?" Chloe hesitated. "Yes, well, I don't know." Her mother fell silent. "Did something happen?" Chloe took a deep breath. "Mr. Sterling saw me last night, eating in the pantry." There was a tense silence. "Did he fire you?" her mother asked with fear. "No, that's the strange part." Chloe pressed the phone to her ear. "He says he wants to help, that he's going to increase my salary, that he wants me to bring the children here." On the other end, her mother sighed deeply. "Darling, be careful." The word fell heavily. "Not all wealthy people help without expecting something in return," the woman continued. "You know that." Chloe looked at the white wall in front of her. "Yes, I know." "What do you feel?" Chloe closed her eyes. "I feel like it's different, but I also feel scared." Her mother didn't respond immediately. "Fear sometimes protects you," she finally said, "but it can also prevent you from seeing an opportunity." Chloe remained silent. "I don't want my children to grow up away from me," she whispered, "but I also don't want them to depend on someone who might change their mind." "Then don't depend on them," her mother replied. "Accept help, but maintain your dignity." Chloe nodded, though her mother couldn't see her. After hanging up, she sat for a few more minutes, thinking about her husband, about David, about the day she saw him leave for the construction site and never return. The construction site where David worked belonged to a subcontracted company. She remembered the name, though she hadn't said it in a long time. Harbor City Constructions. That name sent a shiver down her spine. In the study, Marcus paused his review. He opened an old folder in the lateral filing cabinet, documents of past investments, real estate projects. He searched without knowing exactly what until he found it. A minority participation contract in a local construction company signed 3 years ago. Harbor City Constructions. Marcus frowned. He didn't remember the details of the project. It had been a small investment within a broad portfolio. His team handled the supervision. He rarely intervened directly, but the name unsettled him. He picked up the phone and dialed his assistant. "Carla, I need all safety reports for Harbor City Constructions from the last 5 years." "Of course, Mr. Sterling," she replied, surprised by the unexpected request. Marcus hung up and leaned back in his chair. A suspicion was beginning to form. Hours later, Lachlan returned to the study without knocking. "We have a meeting with investors in 2 hours, he announced. Marcus didn't look up. "Cancel it." Lachlan stood motionless. "Sorry, cancel it. Reschedule." "Marcus, you can't." Marcus looked up with new firmness. "Yes, I can." Lachlan watched him with growing concern. "Are you acting impulsively?" Marcus shook his head slowly. "I'm acting consciously for the first time in a long time." Lachlan sighed. "Does this have to do with the housekeeper?" Marcus remained silent. That was answer enough. Lachlan ran a hand over his face. "You can't jeopardize the business for a sad story." Marcus stood up. "It's not a sad story. It's an injustice." Lachlan looked at him fixedly. "The world is full of injustices." Marcus took a step towards him. "But this one is under my roof." The words resonated in the study. Lachlan remained silent. Meanwhile, Chloe helped Mia with her homework in the playroom. The girl was drawing a house with crayons. "Where are Sophie and Matt?" she asked suddenly. Chloe smiled tenderly. "In Alice Springs, my love." Mia frowned. "Why don't they live with you?" The question was direct, innocent. Chloe took a deep breath. "Because sometimes, adults have to go far to work and provide better things for their children." Mia remained thoughtful. "That's not fair." Chloe stroked her hair. "Sometimes life takes time to be fair." Mia looked up. "My dad can fix it." Chloe felt a lump in her throat. "Your dad can't fix everything." But deep down, a part of her began to wonder if perhaps this time, he could. In the afternoon, Carla arrived at the study with a thick folder. "Here are the reports for Harbor City Constructions," she said, placing it on the desk. Marcus opened the first one. Report of a workplace accident. Worker's name, David Davis. Marcus's heart stopped for a second. Date: 2 years ago. Cause: fall from scaffolding due to inadequate safety harness. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He continued reading. Internal investigation closed due to lack of evidence. No formal compensation. Marcus clenched his teeth. His company had a shareholding in that construction company. He wasn't the main owner, but he was a part of it. He stood up abruptly. Lachlan called from the intercom. "Come now." Lachlan entered minutes later. Marcus threw the document onto the desk. "Did you know about this?" Lachlan read quickly. "Accidents happen in construction." Marcus looked at him in disbelief. "It's Chloe's husband." Lachlan looked up, and Marcus slammed his fist on the desk. "And we are investors in that company." Lachlan frowned. "Minority. We don't manage operations, but we receive profits." The silence was dense. Lachlan spoke in a cold tone. "You can't assume direct responsibility." Marcus looked at him fixedly. "I'm not talking about legal responsibility. I'm talking about moral responsibility." Lachlan sighed. "If you start reviewing every investment under that criterion, you'll dismantle half the portfolio." Marcus remained silent. Perhaps that was exactly what he should do. That night, as the house descended into its usual calm, Chloe returned to the pantry, not to hide, but just to tidy. She stopped in front of the full shelves. She remembered the previous night. She no longer felt the same shame, but a growing uneasiness. Marcus appeared at the door. She turned slowly. "Mr. Sterling." He looked at her with a different intensity. "I need to talk to you." Chloe felt her heart race. "Is it about this morning?" Marcus shook his head. "It's about your husband." Chloe's world stopped. "What about David?" Marcus took a step towards her. "I've been reviewing some documents." Chloe felt a chill run through her body. "What documents?" Marcus swallowed. "The construction company where he worked had participation from my company." The silence was absolute. Chloe looked at him as if she didn't understand. "What do you mean?" Marcus held her gaze. "That, indirectly, I was involved." Chloe's expression changed. Fear gave way to something deeper. Pain, and then slowly, suppressed rage. "You knew?" she asked, her voice broken. "No," he replied firmly. "But that doesn't exempt me." Chloe took a step back. "My husband died because he didn't have safety equipment." Marcus nodded. "I know, and no one helped us." Marcus clenched his fists. "I know that too." Tears began to roll down Chloe's cheeks. "And now what?" she asked. "Are you going to tell me you're sorry?" Marcus felt the weight of guilt like a stone in his chest. "No, I'm going to do something." Chloe let out a bitter laugh. "After 2 years?" Marcus held her gaze without wavering. "Yes, even if it's late." Tension filled the pantry. Chloe was breathing with difficulty. "My husband trusted that company," she whispered. "He believed it was safe." Marcus closed his eyes for a second. "I trusted that my partners acted ethically," he admitted. Chloe raised her chin. "The difference is that you didn't lose anything." That sentence pierced him because she was right, but something was changing, and the past, which seemed buried, was beginning to demand answers. Chloe wiped her tears with the sleeve of her uniform. "I don't want your pity." Marcus took another step closer. "I'm not offering you pity. I'm offering you justice." The word resonated again, but this time, it wasn't just about salary. It was about truth. And truth meant confronting interests, partners, companies, contracts. And when truth begins to move, it shakes structures. And that structure was Marcus Sterling's empire. What neither of them knew yet was that Harbor City Constructions was about to close a new multi-million-dollar contract, and exposing irregularities could sink many. The question was no longer whether Marcus was willing to help Chloe. The question was how much he was willing to lose. And when a millionaire decides to confront his own system, war soon begins. The pantry fell silent after those words. Chloe remained motionless, her eyes shining with contained rage, while Marcus held her gaze without wavering. For the first time, there was no hierarchy between them, just two people facing a truth that hurt too much. "What exactly does that mean?" Chloe finally asked, her voice low but firm. "That you were making money while my husband worked without safety?" Marcus didn't respond immediately. The right words didn't exist, only the truth. "It means I invested in a company I didn't supervise properly," he admitted, "that I trusted reports without questioning them, and that I indirectly benefited from a system that failed." Chloe swallowed. The weight of the years returned like a blow. "Failed," she repeated almost in a whisper. It wasn't a failure, it was negligence. Marcus felt the impact of that word. Negligence. She took a step towards him, but not as a subordinate, as a widow. "My husband didn't die by bad luck." He died because someone decided to cut corners on safety. The air grew heavier. Marcus took a deep breath. I know. No, you don't know, she retorted firmly. You didn't see him brought in, wrapped in a sheet. You didn't hear my children ask why Daddy wasn't waking up. Marcus lowered his gaze for a second, but then met it again. I didn't live it, he admitted. But that doesn't mean I can't take responsibility for what's mine now. Chloe shook her head slowly. What's mine already happened. That phrase was like a sentence. The silence lingered for several seconds. Outside, the distant sound of a car entering the garage broke the tension. Marcus spoke in a lower voice. The internal investigation was closed without formal compensation. That shouldn't have happened. Chloe looked at him with surprise. How do you know that? I read the reports. She felt the ground move beneath her feet. I was never able to access those documents. Marcus clenched his jaw. Because someone didn't want you to see them, the idea began to take shape in Chloe's mind. For 2 years, she had accepted the official version, inevitable accident, bad luck, lack of evidence. But now, with the papers in the hand of a man who did have access to power, the story was beginning to change. What exactly did you find? Marcus walked towards the pantry exit. Come with me. She hesitated for a second, but followed him to the study. Upon entering, she felt the contrast. Dark wood, tall bookshelves, framed diplomas, an office that exuded authority. Marcus closed the door, opened the folder on the desk, and turned it towards her. Chloe approached with uncertain steps. Her hands trembled as she touched the paper. Workplace accident report, David Davis. Her eyes quickly scanned the lines. Lack of certified harness, insufficient supervision, incomplete maintenance record. Chloe felt her breath catch. That wasn't what they told us, she whispered. Marcus. He shook his head. The investigation was closed as an isolated incident, but internal reports show multiple prior warnings about safety. Chloe slowly raised her gaze. Multiple? Marcus nodded. At least 3 previous reports pointed out risks in the scaffolding structure. Chloe's hands began to tremble more forcefully. So they knew, she said almost soundlessly. Some did, and no one did anything. Marcus remained silent. That silence was answer enough. Chloe felt a wave of rage rise in her chest. My husband died because someone decided not to spend money on new harnesses. Marcus closed his eyes for a second. It's possible. The word possible was like salt in a wound. Possible? She repeated with disbelief. You have proof. Marcus looked at her seriously. I have indications, but to turn them into formal evidence, we need an external audit. Chloe stepped back. An audit? Yes. And that implies exposing irregularities that could affect existing contracts. Chloe understood immediately. And that would affect your company? Marcus didn't hesitate. Yes. She observed him in silence. Then why do it? Marcus looked at her as if the answer were obvious. Because the right thing isn't always the convenient thing. Chloe felt something break inside her. For years, she had learned that the powerful always chose convenience. And your brother? She asked. He didn't seem to agree. Marcus let out a slight exhale. Lachlan thinks in numbers. I did too for a long time. And now? Marcus looked at the document on the desk. Now I see a name, your husband's. Silence filled the room again. Chloe sank into the chair in front of the desk. If you open that investigation, there will be consequences. Marcus nodded. For everyone, including you. Yes, Chloe breathed deeply. I don't want you to lose your company because of me. Marcus looked up. It wouldn't be because of you. It would be because of a truth that should have been confronted years ago. Chloe pressed her lips together. And if they can't prove anything? Marcus held her gaze. Then at least we will have tried to do justice. The word reappeared, but this time it carried a different weight. From the hallway, hurried footsteps were heard. The door opened without warning. Lachlan entered with a harsh expression. What's going on here? His gaze went directly to Chloe, sitting in front of the desk. Why is she in your office reviewing confidential documents? Marcus stood up. Because these documents speak of her husband. Lachlan frowned. This is madness. Chloe tried to stand up, but Marcus raised a hand. Stay. Lachlan took a step forward. You can't mix personal matters with strategic investments. Marcus replied with firm calm. They're not personal matters, they're ethical matters. Lachlan let out an ironic laugh. Ethics don't pay payrolls. Marcus looked at him with a determination Lachlan hadn't seen before. But a lack of ethics can destroy everything. Lachlan clenched his teeth. If you open that audit, the major partners might withdraw. Let them. The phrase dropped like a bomb. Lachlan fell silent. Are you willing to risk millions for a housekeeper? Marcus replied without hesitation. I'm willing to risk millions for a life that was treated as disposable. Lachlan watched him for a long time, then spoke in a cold tone. If you do this, you won't have my support. Marcus held his gaze. I understand. Lachlan left the study with a slam of the door. The silence that remained was heavy. Chloe looked at Marcus. I don't want to be the reason for a fight between you two. Marcus shook his head. The fight isn't about you. It's about the way we've been running things. Chloe took a deep breath. What are you going to do now? Marcus picked up the phone. Contact an independent auditor today. Chloe felt a mix of fear and hope. That can take months. Marcus nodded. But it will start today. She looked at him intently. If this goes wrong, you could lose a lot. Marcus looked at her with a new serenity. Perhaps I need to lose something to recover what matters. His words left her speechless. Hours later, while the auditor was being contacted and the first movements began to unfold, the house seemed quiet on the outside, but inside, everything was shifting. Mia ran into the study without knocking. Dad, can I show you something? Marcus knelt to meet her eyes. Of course, princess. She showed him a drawing. It was a big house, with 3 figures outside a girl, a woman in an apron, and a man. That's us, she said, smiling. Chloe lives here too. Chloe, who was standing at the door with a worried expression, felt her heart stop. Marcus looked at the drawing in silence. The image was simple, but powerful. Why did you draw Chloe here? He asked. Mia looked at him as if the question was absurd. Because she looks after us. The child's innocence made the message clear. Chloe felt tears in her eyes. Marcus looked at the drawing with a decision forming inside him. It wasn't just about legal justice. It was about family, but not everyone would see that decision in a good light. That same afternoon, Lachlan received a call from one of the main partners of the construction company. We've been informed that Sterling is requesting an external audit, said the voice on the other end. Is that true? Lachlan looked out his office window. Yes, that could create regulatory problems. Lachlan remained silent. If this goes ahead, there will be consequences for everyone, the partner warned. Lachlan gripped the phone. I know. He hung up slowly. He knew Marcus was crossing a line, and when someone powerful crosses a line, others try to stop them. That night, Chloe returned to her small room, sat on the bed, looking at the bracelet with the initials S and M, her children. She thought about what was happening. She thought about David. She thought about the possibility that the truth would finally come to light. But she also thought about the danger, because exposing corruption in a large construction company was not a game. It could bring reprisals, and Marcus was willing to face them. The question was she ready for what was to come? Because when the truth begins to break through, there's no turning back. The audit began faster than everyone expected. 2 days after that conversation in the pantry, an external team arrived at the central offices of Harbour City Constructions in Sydney. They didn't announce scandals, they didn't raise public suspicions. They arrived in discreet suits, with closed briefcases and a detailed list of requests, maintenance records, safety contracts, internal reports prior to David Davis's accident. The news fell like a stone into a calm lake. In the construction company's boardroom, the operations director, Brendan O'Malley, looked at the documents with a frown. Who authorized this? He asked in a dry voice. Sterling, replied one of the lawyers. He demanded an immediate review. Brendan clenched his jaw. That wasn't in the agreements. He's a minority shareholder. He has the right to request an extraordinary audit if there are indications of irregularities. Brendan tapped the table gently with his fingers. This could destroy us. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Chloe tried to maintain routine as if nothing were happening. She prepared meals, tidied rooms, helped Mia with her homework. But her mind was elsewhere. Every time Marcus's phone rang, her heart raced. Every time she saw his tense expression as he left the study, she felt the past approaching like an inevitable storm. That afternoon, Marcus called her to the study again. She entered with the same nervousness as always, but now there was something more. Anticipation. Any news? She asked in a low voice. Marcus looked at her seriously. Yes. The silence grew heavy. The auditors found something important. Chloe felt her breath catch. What? Marcus turned the laptop screen towards her. Internal emails, communications between supervisors weeks before the accident. Chloe approached slowly, read a line that made her shiver. Replacing harnesses means delays and additional costs. Maintain current equipment until next phase. The date was clear, 1 month before David's death. Chloe brought a hand to her mouth. They knew, she whispered. Marcus nodded gravely. There were formal warnings about equipment wear and tear. They decided to postpone the investment. Chloe's legs trembled. She sank into the chair. "My husband died to save money." The phrase was almost inaudible, but strong enough to break something within the study. Marcus sat opposite her. "This is no longer just negligence. It's a cover-up." Chloe looked at him, her eyes filled with suppressed tears. "What's going to happen now?" Marcus took a deep breath. "If the auditors confirm direct responsibility, the case can be legally reopened." She felt an internal shock. "After 2 years? Yes, with new evidence, it's possible." Chloe closed her eyes. For 2 years, she had forced herself to accept that it was an inevitable accident. She had repeated that version to herself to be able to move forward, not to go crazy with rage. And now, the truth was opening a wound that never closed. "If this comes to light," she said slowly, "the company could close." Marcus held her gaze. "It could lose contracts. It could face lawsuits. And you, too." The silence returned. Chloe lowered her gaze. "I don't want to ruin your life." Marcus shook his head firmly. "My life isn't ruined by facing the truth. It would be ruined if I ignored it." She looked at him with a mix of gratitude and fear. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. Marcus took a second before replying. "Because that night in the pantry, I understood something. It wasn't just about hunger. It was about dignity. And if I close my eyes to this, I'll continue to be part of the same system that allowed your husband to die." Chloe felt the tears finally escape. "I just wanted someone to acknowledge that it wasn't his fault," she whispered, "that it wasn't David's carelessness." Marcus nodded. "It wasn't his fault." That affirmation, said with conviction, was like a painful balm. But the atmosphere was far from calming down. That same night, Lachlan entered the study with an alarmed expression. "The partners are furious," he announced. "Brendan O'Malley is threatening to sue you for reputational damage." Marcus didn't move. "Let him." Lachlan looked at him incredulously. "This could escalate to the media." "Perhaps it should." Lachlan took a step forward. "Are you willing to turn this into a national scandal?" Marcus replied with calm serenity. "If that means fewer workers die because of cost-cutting on safety, yes." Lachlan watched him for a long time. "I've never seen you like this." Marcus briefly lowered his gaze. "Neither have I." Chloe, who was listening from the hallway without wanting to, felt a mix of vertigo and determination. The truth was coming out, but with each revelation, the risk increased. And somewhere in Sydney, Brendan O'Malley made urgent calls, seeking allies, trying to halt the inevitable. Because when money is at stake, morality becomes a threat. And now the threat had a name: David Davis. The question was no longer whether there was negligence. The question was who else knew and who would be willing to lie to protect everything. The pressure began to feel like a constant pulse in the Sterling house. It wasn't visible. There were no journalists at the door, no headlines yet, but Marcus's phone wouldn't stop ringing, and each call brought the same warning disguised as advice. "Think carefully. This could backfire on you. Too many interests are involved." But it was no longer just a business matter. It was David Davis's name on an official document. It was a decision that years ago had prioritized savings over life. That morning, the auditors returned with a preliminary report much more forceful than Marcus expected. In the study, the atmosphere was dense. Chloe was present, this time by Marcus's explicit decision, not as an employee, but as an affected party. The lead auditor, a man in a gray suit named Stephen Reynolds, opened his folder. "We have identified multiple irregularities," he said with a technical but firm voice. "Not only in the case of Mr. David Davis." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" Stephen placed several documents on the table. There were at least 4 previous accidents on the same site, all related to failures in safety equipment. None were officially reported to WorkSafe NSW. Chloe felt a chill run down her spine. 4? She whispered. "Yes," Stephen replied, "and in 2 of them, there were serious injuries." Marcus closed his eyes for a second. This was no longer an isolated tragedy, it was a pattern. "Who authorized the decisions regarding the safety budget?" Marcus asked. Stephen turned a page. "The operations director, Brendan O'Malley. But we also found emails where he mentions the need to maintain profitability margins demanded by investors." Silence fell like a slab. Marcus understood what that implied. It wasn't just operational negligence, it was financial pressure. "Are you referring to us?" he asked, his voice controlled. Stephen held his gaze. "Your company was among the shareholders requesting an increase in quarterly returns." The air seemed to leave the study. Chloe looked at Marcus, not with hatred, but with devastation. Marcus felt an internal blow stronger than any before. Are you saying that the pressure for profitability influenced the reduction of safety costs? He asked. It's highly probable, Stephen replied. The email suggested clearly. One of the documents was slid towards Chloe. She took it with trembling hands. She read an underlined phrase. If we do not adjust operational expenses, investors will withdraw support. The date was 2 weeks before the accident. Chloe felt the world tilt. So, it wasn't just the director, she said, her voice barely audible. It was an entire system. Marcus couldn't meet her gaze this time because he understood something devastating. Although he hadn't signed any direct order, although he hadn't been present on the site, the system he helped build had created the pressure that ultimately killed David. The silence lingered for several seconds. Legally, Stephen continued, direct responsibility falls on operational management, but in terms of media and ethics, this can escalate. Marcus nodded slowly. Recommendation. If you decide to proceed, you must be prepared for a legal battle and for your name to appear in headlines alongside the case. Chloe looked up. Headlines? Stephen looked at her with respect. Yes, this is no longer just an internal audit. When the auditor left, the study fell silent. Marcus remained standing by the window, looking at the impeccable garden, which now seemed ironic. Chloe was still seated, the document still in her hands. You didn't know, she said, finally breaking the silence. Marcus didn't respond immediately. No, I didn't know, he admitted, but I was part of the machine. Chloe took a deep breath. David trusted your company. That phrase was like a knife. Marcus closed his eyes. I trusted that my partners acted ethically. Chloe slowly stood up. Are you going to continue? Marcus turned to her. Yes, even if they accuse me. Yes, even if I lose contracts. Yes. Chloe watched him in long silence. Then, this is no longer just for my husband. Marcus shook his head gently. No, it's for all the workers who are still out there. At that instant, the phone rang. Marcus looked at the screen. Brendan O'Malley, he answered. Sterling, Brendan said, his voice tense. We need to talk. I'm listening. You're taking this too far. Marcus didn't respond. The audit has already reached WorkSafe NSW, Brendan continued. Do you know what that means? That the truth is coming out, Marcus replied with calm firmness. Brendan let out a bitter laugh. The truth doesn't pay multi-million-dollar compensations. Marcus gripped the phone. Lies cost lives. There was a heavy silence on the other end. If you go ahead, I'll drag you down with me, Brendan warned. You won't come out clean from this. Marcus looked at Chloe. I'm not looking to come out clean. I'm looking for the truth to come out. He hung up. Chloe felt the weight of the threat. He's not just an annoyed businessman, she said. He's someone with power. Marcus nodded. And power gets uncomfortable when it feels exposed. That night, the first news story appeared on a digital portal. Harbor City Constructions under investigation for possible irregularities in workplace safety. David Davis's name appeared in the article. Chloe read it from her small room. Her hands trembled. For the first time, her husband's name was not accompanied by the word accident. It was accompanied by the word investigation. Tears rolled down her face. They were not just of pain, they were of vindication. Upstairs, Lachlan paced back and forth in his office. This is a disaster, he muttered. Marcus entered without knocking. It's not a disaster, it's a consequence. Lachlan looked at him with frustration. The partners are withdrawing capital preemptively. Let them, you could lose millions. Marcus approached. If those millions are built on silences like this, then they're worth nothing. Lachlan looked at him in silence. I never thought you'd say that. Marcus took a deep breath. Neither did I. Downstairs, in the dining room, Mia was drawing again. Chloe sat beside her. Why are you crying? The girl asked innocently. Chloe smiled weakly. Because sometimes, my love, sad things start to get a little better. Mia tilted her head. Is it because of your husband? Chloe nodded. Yes. The girl took her hand. My dad said he's going to do the right thing. Chloe looked towards the study. She knew that decision could destroy many things, but she also knew there was no turning back. That same morning, a new report arrived in Marcus's email. The auditor had found something else, an internal document marked confidential. A memo where Brendan O'Malley warned that if external audits reviewed safety conditions, shared responsibility could arise with investors who pressed for profitability margins. Marcus felt a sharp blow. Shared responsibility. That included him, and this time not as a spectator, but as an actor. He looked at the document for a long time. He knew that if he made it public, the impact would be devastating for the construction company, for his own company, for his reputation, but he also knew that hiding it would turn him into exactly what he always criticized. Chloe gently knocked on the study door. "May I come in?" Marcus nodded. She entered and noticed the grave expression on his face. "What's wrong?" Marcus turned the screen towards her. "This." Chloe read the memo slowly. When she finished, she looked up. "So, you were involved." Marcus nodded with brutal honesty. "Indirectly, but yes." The silence became eternal. Chloe took a deep breath. "What are you going to do?" Marcus looked at her intently. "Own it." The word fell like a definitive declaration. Chloe felt the ground disappear beneath her feet, because that decision would change everything, not just her story, but that of a man who was willing to confront his own empire. And when a millionaire decides to demolish the structures that sustain him, the world trembles, but the truth finally begins to breathe. The news exploded like thunder at dawn. Shareholder acknowledges financial pressure linked to reduction of safety measures at Harbor City Constructions. Marcus Sterling's name appeared in national headlines. Some called him brave, others reckless. Some directly accused him of hypocrisy. But what no one knew was that this public confession had not been easy. The night before, in the study, Marcus had sat for hours in front of a camera, a recorded message, without advisors, without lawyers, correcting phrases, just him and the truth. "My name is Marcus Sterling." He had begun with a firm but sincere voice. "For years, I was part of a system that prioritized profitability over safety. Although I did not sign any direct order, I recognized that the financial pressure generated by investors contributed to decisions that ultimately cost lives, among them, that of David Davis. As he pronounced that name publicly, something changed within him. It was no longer a data point in a report. It was a man, a husband, a father. The broadcast went viral in a matter of hours. At the mansion, the atmosphere was charged. Lachlan walked with the phone pressed to his ear. "We're losing contracts," he muttered tensely. 3 have already cancelled. Marcus listened without reacting. "Do you realize what you've done?" Lachlan finally exclaimed. "You admitted responsibility to the entire country." Marcus looked at him with serenity. "I admitted moral responsibility. That's enough for lawyers to build lawsuits. Then let them build them." Lachlan looked at him with incredulity. "You could lose everything we've built." Marcus took a deep breath. "If what we've built stands on unjust silences, then perhaps it deserves to fall." The silence between the brothers was long. "I don't recognize you," Lachlan murmured. Marcus lowered his gaze for an instant. "I didn't recognize myself before either." In the kitchen, Chloe watched the repeated broadcast on the small television used by the staff. She heard her own name mentioned, Chloe Davis, widow of the deceased worker. Her hands trembled. She never imagined that David's story would emerge from the shadows. She never imagined that the most powerful man in the house would stand before cameras and say his name with respect. Mia ran in. "Chloe, my dad's on TV." Chloe smiled weakly. "I know, my love." The girl looked at the screen. "He's telling the truth, isn't he?" Chloe nodded. "Yes, he's telling the truth. But the truth doesn't just bring relief, it brings consequences." That same afternoon, Brendan O'Malley called a press conference. With a firm gesture, he denied direct responsibility and announced that the construction company would take legal action against Marcus for damaging and unfounded statements. The conflict was no longer private, it was public, and when power is exposed, it reacts. At the mansion, a dark car parked in front of the main gate. A man in a suit got out with a folder in his hand, a process server. Lachlan received the document with a pale face. "Lawsuit for damages," he announced in a dry voice. "I told you so." Marcus took the envelope without trembling. Chloe watched from a distance, her heart heavy. "I don't want this to ruin your life," she whispered when they were alone. Marcus looked at her with unexpected calm. "My life was already ruined. I just didn't know it." She frowned. "You had success, money, a solid company." Marcus shook his head gently, and I was empty. Chloe remained silent. "The night I saw you in the pantry," he continued, "I understood something. It wasn't just your hunger, it was my indifference." Chloe felt the words pierce her chest. "I didn't want you to feel guilty," she said. Marcus looked at her fixedly. "I don't feel guilty for feeling compassion. I feel responsible for not having felt it sooner." The phone rang again. This time it was a national channel requesting a live interview. Marcus accepted. Lachlan looked at him in desperation. "Are you going to keep exposing yourself?" Marcus nodded. "Yes." Hours later, in a television studio in Sydney, Marcus sat opposite the journalist. "Mr. Sterling," she began, "why take responsibility when legally you could avoid it?" Marcus held her gaze. Because legality doesn't always coincide with justice. Are you prepared to face financial consequences? Yes. And personal ones? Marcus took a deep breath. I'm already facing the consequence of having lived too long without questioning my decisions. The interview ended with a phrase that went viral. It's not about losing money, it's about recovering humanity. Meanwhile, in Alice Springs, Chloe's mother watched television with tears in her eyes. Darling, she whispered into the phone when Chloe called. For the first time, someone is recognizing that David wasn't to blame. Chloe cried in silence. Yes, Mum, finally. But the pressure continued to mount. Shareholders began to withdraw capital. Marcus's company shares fell on the stock exchange. Lachlan confronted him again. This is a free fall. Marcus looked at the figures on the screen. Perhaps we needed to fall to rise differently. Lachlan was speechless. That night, Marcus went up to Mia's room. The girl was awake. Dad, are you sad? Marcus sat beside her. A little. Because they're scolding you on TV? Marcus smiled softly. Not exactly. Then why? Marcus took her small hand. Because doing the right thing sometimes hurts. Mia looked at him with childish seriousness. But you always tell me to tell the truth. Marcus felt a lump in his throat. And that's what I'm doing. The girl hugged him. Then I'm proud of you. That sentence was more powerful than any lost contract. Downstairs in the staff quarters, Chloe sat on the bed with the thread bracelet between her fingers. She thought of David. She thought of how he always told her that the important thing was to live with dignity. She thought of Marcus confronting the world and understood something. This was no longer just justice for her husband. It was transformation. In the study, Marcus signed documents with determination. Internal restructuring. Creation of a permanent workplace safety fund for all linked companies. Mandatory external supervision. Lachlan watched him in silence. Are you really going to change the whole model? Marcus nodded. Yes. That will reduce profits. Then, we will reduce profits. Lachlan sighed deeply. I never thought I'd have to choose principles over profits. Marcus looked up. I never thought I'd understand that without principles, profits mean nothing. Outside, the press began to divide opinions. Some business people criticized his stance. Others began to review their own practices. The wave could no longer be stopped. And in the midst of that storm, Chloe stopped feeling invisible, not because of fame, but because David's life was being recognized as valuable. That night, Marcus walked to the pantry, stopped at the door, remembered the first scene, the woman sitting on the floor, the plate of leftovers, and the shame, and understood that that image was the beginning of everything. Chloe appeared behind him. Are you thinking about that night? She asked softly. Marcus nodded. Yes, me too. They looked at each other in silence. Thank you, Chloe finally said. Marcus gently shook his head. Don't thank me for doing what I should have done from the beginning. Chloe took a deep breath. Still, thank you. The silence was no longer tense. It was human. The legal battle was just beginning. The financial losses were real, but something bigger was happening. A man was ceasing to be just a millionaire. He was learning to be fair. And when justice becomes a decision, power changes its meaning. But what neither of them knew yet was that the greatest test wouldn't be the economic downturn. It would be the threat that was about to arrive from those unwilling to let the truth advance further. The threat arrived a week after the national interview. It wasn't public, it wasn't legal, it was silent. An unmarked envelope appeared in Marcus's office. Inside, a single sheet of paper printed with cold letters. Back off now, or lose more than money. Marcus held the paper for a long time without saying anything. He wasn't naive. He knew that touching big interests always brought consequences. But seeing the threat written, concrete, directed, was different. Lachlan was the first to speak when he read the message. This is no longer just reputation, he said in a low voice. It's dangerous. Marcus nodded. I know. You could stop here, Lachlan insisted. You've done enough. You admitted mistakes. You created the safety fund. You don't have to completely destroy yourself. Marcus looked out the study window. The garden was still impeccable. The outside world seemed calm. If I stop now, I teach them that intimidation works. Lachlan remained silent. Downstairs in the kitchen, Chloe felt a strange unease. She had learned to read the shifts in energy in the house. That morning, the air was tense. Marcus came down the stairs with the envelope in his hand. I need to talk to you, he said softly. Chloe stopped what she was doing. They sat in the dining room, the same place where everything began to transform. Marcus placed the paper on the table. Chloe read it slowly. Her face paled. This is because of me, she whispered. Marcus shook his head. It's because of what we are doing. Chloe clenched her hands. I don't want anything to happen to you or your daughter because of this. Marcus looked at her firmly. Mia will not grow up in a world where her father backs down out of fear. Chloe felt a lump in her chest. But there are powerful people behind this. I know. The silence was long. Are you going to report the threat? She asked. Yes, and he did. He presented the letter to the authorities and made it public. The gesture generated even more media impact. Some called him reckless, others began to openly support him. Several labor organizations offered backing, and something unexpected happened. Other workers began to speak up. Anonymous emails reached WorkSafe NSW. Testimonies from laborers confirming similar pressures on other sites. The story stopped being just David Davis's. It became a symbol. Meanwhile, Marcus's company's financial situation weakened. Falling shares, suspended contracts. Lachlan faced constant calls from furious investors. One night, exhausted, Lachlan entered the study without announcing himself. "We are on the verge of collapse," he said, his voice broken. Marcus looked up. "How much?" Lachlan took a deep breath. "If this continues, we'll have to sell part of the group." The silence was heavy. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. His entire life he had worked to expand that empire. Now he was willing to see it shrink. "Do it," he finally said. Lachlan looked at him in surprise. "Really?" "Yes." "Doesn't it hurt?" Marcus thought for a few seconds. "It would hurt more to look Chloe in the eyes and know I backed down." Lachlan lowered his gaze. "I don't know if I'm as strong as you." Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's not about strength. It's about choosing what kind of man you want to be." Meanwhile, in Alice Springs, Sophie and Matt watched television with their grandmother. "Mum's on the news again," Sophie said. The grandmother smiled with contained pride. "Your dad would be proud." In Sydney, an unexpected call changed the course of everything. It was WorkSafe NSW. "Mr. Sterling, we have enough evidence to open criminal proceedings against Brendan O'Malley and several operational managers." Marcus closed his eyes. "Does it include a review of shared responsibility for investors?" There was a brief silence on the other end. "Yes." Marcus knew what that implied. His name would remain linked to the case, but it also meant something bigger, real justice. When he hung up, he looked for Chloe. He found her in the garden helping Mia plant flowers. "Chloe," he called softly. She stood up. "Did something happen?" Marcus nodded. "The case is formally reopened. There will be criminal proceedings." Chloe remained motionless. Her hands began to tremble. "Truly?" "Yes." Chloe brought a hand to her chest. 2 years of silence. 2 years of accepting a version that always seemed incomplete. Now, finally, justice was moving. Tears began to roll down her face. Marcus said nothing, just stood there. Mia looked at the scene, confused. "Why are you crying?" Chloe knelt in front of the child. "Because sometimes, my love, pain takes time to get an answer, but when it comes, it heals a little." Mia hugged her. That image remained etched in Marcus's memory. A woman who had gone hungry in his pantry was now hugging his daughter while justice began to act. Weeks later, Brendan O'Malley was formally summoned. The internal documents came to light. The financial pressure was exposed. Shared responsibility was recognized in the file. Marcus publicly accepted his moral and economic part. He paid direct compensation to Chloe's family, beyond any judicial obligation. But he did it in private, without cameras, without press. One day, he called Chloe to the study. On the desk were legal documents and a small box. "The official compensation will arrive through the judicial process," he said. "This is separate." Chloe opened the box. Inside, there was a property contract, an apartment in Sydney in her and her children's names. Chloe looked at him, unable to speak. "It's not charity," Marcus clarified. "It's restitution. And it's also a way to ensure Sophie and Matt can live with you." Chloe burst into tears. "I don't know how to thank you for this." Marcus gently shook his head. "Don't thank me. I'm rebuilding something too." And it was true, because while his financial empire was shrinking, his personal life was being rebuilt. He spent more time with Mia, listened more, looked more. One Sunday, months later, the mansion was no longer the same. They had sold part of the business group. The pace was calmer. Chloe no longer lived in the staff quarters. Her children had arrived in Sydney. Sophie played in the garden with Mia. Matt ran after a ball. Marcus watched the scene from the terrace. Lachlan approached. "We lost a lot," he said. Marcus nodded. "Yes, but you also gained something." Marcus looked down to where Chloe was laughing with the children. "Yes," Lachlan sighed. "I didn't think this ending was possible." Marcus smiled slightly. "Neither did I." That afternoon, as the sun set over Sydney, Chloe approached Marcus. "Sophie wants to tell you something," she said. The girl timidly approached. "Thank you for helping my mum." Marcus knelt to be at her height. "Thank you for trusting me." The girl smiled, and at that instant, Marcus understood something with absolute clarity. Money builds walls, but empathy builds bridges. That night, when everyone went to sleep, Marcus returned to the pantry. He stood at the door, remembering the image that changed his life. A woman hiding to eat leftovers, a small scene, an almost invisible moment, but enough to bring down an entire system within him. He took a deep breath and understood the final lesson. Sometimes we don't need to see a great tragedy to change. Sometimes it's enough to look directly at those we always ignored. Because true power isn't in how much you have, it's in how much you are willing to transform. When you discover you were wrong, and true wealth is not measured in figures, it is measured in the ability to recognize errors, assume responsibilities, and choose humanity over fear. If this story leaves anything in your heart, let it be this. Never underestimate the impact of a small act of conscience, because a decision made in silence can change entire destinies. And sometimes the biggest change begins when we stop looking up and start looking into the eyes of those who were always in front of us.